Hey everyone, welcome to the Star Wars Canon Cantina, a show where we try to answer the question, who is Luke Skywalker, before the release of Star Wars Episode 9. My name is Mike, I am broadcasting from Salt Lake Base here on planet Utah, and I'm with my co-host, as I'm with every week, Jesse. He's got so much Star Wars knowledge, the Empire would think he'd need a Lobot cybernetic head attachment to hold all this info. Jesse, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing pretty good. I'd probably be okay with that. So I'm broadcasting out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, standard place, and Mike and I are convening on Skype.
Tulsa-based planet, Oklahoma.
I like that, yeah. So, it's a dusty planet.
Both planets are too hot right now.
Yeah, a lot of just great plains. So today we are talking about a whole new thing, Mike. So far we've talked about trilogy films, which are canon. We've talked about one of the first sources of the original EU, which is now the Disney Legends universe, which was Shadows of the Empire. And now we are on to one of the first canonical Disney EU elements, which is the Marvel Comics.
That's right. I can't exactly remember if Aftermath came out before this or after it. I know they were pretty close together, though.
Aftermath came out in the fall, and this came out in the spring.
Okay. They're tackling different time periods, so it's not a huge deal. But yeah, this was our first exposure to not just new canon comics, but Star Wars being back at Marvel after being at Dark Horse for so long.
100%. So we have this whole new storyline of comics that is actually canonical. So you haven't read this. This will bridge some gaps between the films that now is considered canon via Disney. What I'm gonna do a quick blurb here, Mike. We're gonna talk about something I'm pretty excited about. We hadn't talked about on the show yet, but that is, if you guys are listening at home, first of all, thank you. Second of all, I'm excited for you guys because not only are we going to analyze the character and development of Luke Skywalker throughout all of Legends and then the new canon and all the films, but for you guys at home, I'm hoping this is just a timeline of all the events in Luke Skywalker's life, old and new, and that you guys can just listen to this as a timeline. And what I mean by that is, if you're not interested in reading the old EU, if you're not interested in reading the new EU, you just want to see the films, we're going to hopefully bridge that gap for you and give you guys more information, not only on Luke, but the actual storylines that fill the gaps in Star Wars. And I hope our show can be an interesting way to do that. We're not really a book show, Mike, like some of these shows are, but I think we're going to hopefully present an informative and entertaining way all the major plot points of particular storylines involving Luke, like we did with Shadows of the Empire.
That's right. We're not going to hit every single piece of Star Wars content out there because Luke's not in all of them, or he's not the central character in all of them. We're focusing on him. But you're right. We do our best to stay chronological, a timeline, a chronological timeline of the Legends and current canon, just Luke's adventure. So today we are tackling the first 6 issues, the first major arc of the Star Wars mainline comic from Marvel. Written by Jason Aaron, art by John Cassidy, who coincidentally, I love John Cassidy's art. One of my 2 favorite comic series ever is Planetary, and he did all the art for that. So if you haven't read Planetary, go check it out.
Oh, very good. Very good. I've heard nothing but good stuff, and I need to read it. So a lot of you guys at home might not read comics, so hopefully this will be a introduction to that to you, especially if you just want to listen. But Mike, you said the first 6 issues. So what that means is the first 6 comics of this series, which is the Star Wars Marvel series. Also, you can buy this in graphic novel form, and all a graphic novel is several issues of comics bound together in either a hardcover or a softcover in one issue.
Boy, we are taking it to the basics for non-comic fans. That's cool.
Well, I'm just going to throw that out there because this is a good example, Mike, of my comic stuff. I don't like individual issues of comics. I like the graphic novels. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll read them maybe as they come out, either borrow them or maybe purchase them. But eventually I'm going to buy the graphic novels because I like the bound versions of these comics on my shelves that are in these compilations.
I tend to agree. It sort of just depends on what the specific comic is, if I need to know that week or whatever. But yeah, I'm with you on that. We both read this digitally.
Right. No, actually, I have a physical copy.
Oh, you have the physical copy? I thought you
Yeah.
said you were going to read it digitally. My bad. I used the Comixology app for this, which was pretty sweet. Still on my free trial of Comixology Unlimited. Not sure
Oh, nice.
how uh, how long I'll keep that, but it was good enough to get me prepped for this episode.
So I'll jump in there, Mike, and say, yeah, if any of you guys are comic newbies, if you don't want to buy the individual issues, I mean, you don't want to buy these graphic novels, a good thing to do would be to get Comixology, which is a comic service provided by Amazon, or get Marvel Unlimited, which is a digital comic service provided by Marvel. Just think of it like a Spotify or iTunes subscription, where all you do is pay a small monthly fee and you get unlimited access to all the comics that came out that month. It's a really nice tool, really, Mike, and it's a good thing to have. And I just wanted to mention it here because if you're enjoying the storyline of Star Wars, you could read along with us. You get the Marvel Limited subscription or the Comixology and just read these Star Wars issues alongside us.
And that's right. We are talking the first 6 issues today. I believe it has just come out or is soon to be released. Is issue number 51. So this has been going, since 2015. They've got plenty of issues out. There's also the Darth Vader line that is really good. There's also comics that don't involve Luke. The Poe Dameron comics really good. The 5-issue run Lando miniseries was fantastic.
You're gonna say it. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the Vader series. Basically, up to this point, Mike, all I've kept up with is Star Wars and Vader, but I'm dramatically behind on both. And I'm very excited to reread this stuff to do a deep dive on the show.
I actually fell off of the Star Wars comics wagon not long after this launched. Like, I think I read maybe issue 8 when it was, timely. So I'm excited with this Comixology Unlimited to, get caught back up. I've got a bunch of issues ahead of me. Sponsor
Yeah, I'm excited.
Comixology.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. And just, to tell the listeners at home, I got my first tablet as in like a month ago. So I'm just in the land of the living now in 2018.
Welcome to the future.
Right. And so for me, it makes perfect sense to get a Comixology or Marvel Unlimited subscription. Look at these beautiful comics on this really nice screen and experience that. So I think that's what I'm doing as well. But I do have the first 12 issues of this Star Wars series in graphic novel format. So I have the first 2 issues of the graphic novel on my shelf right here. So, and we'll be covering the next 6, obviously, next time. So let's talk about the comic real quick. So the comic was released in January 5th, 2015, about a year, Mike, before The Force Awakens came out.
Yep. Very
11 months or so.
same year. The title of the first 6-issue arc is called Skywalker Strikes.
Yeah, it is. That's the name of the graphic novel if you want to pick it up. It's probably a good name for this. This is very Luke-centric content. So we're really excited to talk about this with you with you guys. Excuse me. But let's go ahead and talk about the questions we're going to ask about every arc with Luke. Let's refresh you guys on that.
Okay. So the questions we ask every episode. What state is Luke in at the beginning of the story? And if you have listened to all of our episodes up to this point, thank you so much. I've expanded our second question a little bit after our Shadows of the Empire discussion. And our second question is, how do the events and characters of the story impact Luke's development? I made this change just after I realized we talked about Dash Rendar and so many other side characters in our Shadows of the Empire episode, that they're important and shouldn't be, ignored, but we are still keeping the focus on Luke. And our third question, does this fit with the Luke that we meet in Episode 8, The Last Jedi?
Ever since Luke disappeared, people have been looking for him.
I'm Luke Skywalker. I'm here to rescue you.
A lot of rumors, stories.
And I became a legend.
People that knew him best.
Luke.
Young Skywalker. Luke.
It's all true.
I am a Jedi. Like my father before me.
All of it.
Let's just start off with the story, Mike. Do you happen to have the crawl? Do we want to do a Tom Kane?
I'm getting it ready.
I figured you were. So let's talk about the comic itself. It was written by Jason Aaron. And as Mike said earlier, the art was done by John Cassidy. So a cool thing about comics, once again, you get the melding of 2 artists, sometimes more than 2 artists, sometimes a few writers, few artists. So, but this particular issue, these 6 are written by those 2.
And at the time, I'm not saying they're not now, but in 2015, Jason Aaron and John Cassidy were like heavy hitters in the comics industry. Like, Marvel put some of their best people on this line to make sure it started off great.
So you want to do the blurb here?
Here we go. Book 1, Skywalker Strikes. It is a period of renewed hope for the rebellion. The evil Galactic Empire's greatest weapon, the Death Star, has been destroyed by the young rebel pilot Luke Skywalker. With the Imperial forces in disarray, the rebels look to press their advantage by unleashing a daring offensive throughout the far reaches of space, hoping to defeat the Empire once and for all, and at last restore freedom to the galaxy.
Very good.
It's all right.
So I don't know if we mentioned this yet, Mike, but the crawl just mentioned it. This takes place almost immediately after A New Hope.
Yeah.
So this is going to fill those gaps between A New Hope and Empire, like Shadows of the Empire filled the gaps between Empire and Return of the Jedi. So we're going to have
Luke as we
untrained Luke.
Well, Luke, as we meet him, he's riding pretty high, though. He, left his home 3 weeks ago, and he's already the biggest hero in the galaxy. He just destroyed the Death Star, man. He's a rock star overnight. So he's feeling it. He's quite a confident, young hero at this point.
I love it. And apparently the rebellion's already got him, Han, and Leia, like we said, in that trio, that family that's blossoming, already on missions. And of course they have Chewie and the droids with them. So after the opening crawl, we have a Hutt ship. We see our heroes in. They land on Corellia. And Han is with the gang, we'll call it that.
They land on Simoon 1, part of the Corellian shipyard system or whatever.
Corellian systems and shipyards. Yeah, you're completely right, Mike. And everyone, what I thought was interesting here, I'm sure you noticed this as well, Mike. Everyone, Leia, Luke, they're all wearing the Lando getup, as in the.
Oh, you mean the Beckett getup?
The Beckett getup.
How many of those
Lando
masks were on the Falcon? I swear.
I don't know, but it's so funny. We just talked about this with Shadows and Return of the Jedi.
Yeah,
Lando's mask and all this stuff, his armor. So they're all wearing this. Han sweet talks the Imperial officer and the Imperial troopers because they're sent. Han tells them they're sent on a mission via Jabba the Hutt to deliver goods to the Empire, and apparently Jabba's doing smuggling runs and things like that for the Empire.
And this is meant to be our first jarring moment because we don't expect to see Han just wearing his, blaster, his vest and everything and just saying, hey, I'm Han Solo. Because at this point, the Empire really doesn't know who he is.
Yeah, they have no idea. They're like, oh, some freighter showed up at the end of that battle and killed Vader's wingman. That's it. Han sweet talks these officers. Eventually, we get to a point where they go through the facility and they show them all the things the Empire's working on in Corellia. As you guys know from Solo, the Corellian shipyards were a main manufacturer of the Empire's weapons, Star Destroyers, and cruisers. That's kind of what the story's referencing here, which is cool. Han sweet talks this officer.
He
and
sort of sweet talks him. The officer lets him talk.
He starts backtracking.
The officer lets him talk and like, whatever. We're going to go do what we want and you're just going to deal with it.
And at this point as an audience, we assume the other people with him are Luke and Leia and some other guys, rebel guys, but we don't really fully know. It's all centered on Han and R2 right now.
It's just the two that step off.
And R2's with them as well. So at this point, R2 does a classic R2 moment, probably more of a classic R2 prequel moment. He just starts emitting fluid everywhere, and the officer's like, "You need to tend to your droid." The troopers go over to the droid, which is R2. R2 being R2, he immediately kills them all. He lights the fluid.
He could just be incapacitating them. R2's like squirting this green liquid on the floor that's some sort of conductor, and then he zaps it to, shock the stormtroopers. I'm betting at least one of them survived. He's not Chopper.
No, he's not Chopper. He doesn't murder people and gleam with joy about it. But, R2's he could go that way if he kept going dark side. So, man, R2, hero of the rebellion. So at this point, obviously, the base is on high alert, and we realize now that Han, Luke, and Leia are on some sort of mission to maybe destroy this base, something like that. They start fighting troopers. We actually see Luke in the yellow jacket now, which is the yellow jacket at the end of New Hope that he gets, where he also has the Han Solo pants with the Corellian stripes, and he has the Han Solo blaster, the DL-44, like we mentioned. He has, the black shirt and the yellow jacket that we only see at the end of New Hope cinematically. But now he's wearing that all through the series. And Luke even draws his lightsaber, so Luke's doing a little bit of lightsaber blaster combo stuff at this point. He still is very untrained in the lightsaber, but he starts using
it's a very we need to back up a little bit because that's a few pages later on. They're there to destroy this shipyard. They're going to plant some charges, overload the reactor, blow it up. And Luke finds some caged slave workers after this Imperial that they met and was saying everything's automated. Obviously it's not. Then the slaver has this, kind of cool laser whip and threatens Luke. And he says, "Don't you draw that blaster." And Luke says, "I won't draw my blaster." And that's when we see the lightsaber, which was a pretty sweet moment.
Yeah, Luke actually feels these slaves calling out to him. He feels the Force pulling on him. He doesn't know what it is. He just follows it. And in doing that, he encounters these slaves. He tries on the guard. These aren't the slaves you're looking for. And the guy says, "What?" Like he was just trying to emulate Ben. I got that in the notes here, and it's great. And Mike's right. So Mike, I'm going to reference this real quick. This is a EU thing. So the slave master using this whip. This is a lot of stuff pulled from the old EU. So there's a lot of
what this is called or whatever.
Well, the whip's not as relevant, but what's more relevant is a lot of the Trandoshan slavers use these electro whips to enslave the Wookiees. So there's a whole feud between the Trandoshans and the Wookiees, which is Bosk's race, the bounty hunter shown in Empire Strikes Back, and obviously Chewbacca. And there's a feud between their two races. And actually what the Trandoshans do is they are hired out via the Empire to contract slave the Wookiees for labor and things like that. And they use these whips.
Looking at these slaves, not a Wookiee in there, but also not a human anywhere to be seen. We've got Biff, Mon Calamari, Zabrak, Twi'lek, Ithorian, what's Ahsoka? Togruta. We got a group of Jawas in there. So
Jawas, I love it. Yeah.
Keeping with their, pro-human stance, the Empire is enslaving, non-humans.
I don't know how much you guys at home know this, but obviously it's apparent in the films, but it's just understood in the films. It's not really said, but in the EU, they make it very clear that Palpatine had a hatred for other races. And then Thrawn came around, and he kind of
But we're not talking about the EU today.
No, but this is completely consistent with the Palpatine and Empire we know. Very little women and no aliens. So at this point, Luke fights this guy briefly with the lightsaber. He blocks the whip.
Then cuts his hand off.
Cuts his hand off, and the guy kind of stumbles away. Once again, Luke doesn't murder the guy or just kill him. The guy just kind of stumbles off, like screaming, like, "I'm out of here. This is not worth it." And Luke frees the slaves, which I think is an awesome start to Luke's story in this. At this point, Han, Leia, and Chewie are in trouble. They're fighting troopers. And we see a Imperial shuttle land. The Imperial shuttles we have seen in the second and third films of the original trilogy, as in 5 and 6, which is Vader and Palpatine's shuttle. Some sort of officer says the negotiator has arrived. The next shot we see is Vader coming down a shuttle. So apparently Vader's the negotiator. So it's already
General Kenobi, the negotiator,
has arrived. At this point, Chewbacca is sitting on a cliff face, and he's basically been watching the scene. He has a rifle, a sniper rifle of some sort, and he's ready to respond if needed. And Chewie calls into Han and says, "Vader's here." And Leia says, "Vader, take the shot now."
Yeah. No. Well, Han and Leia have very different reactions. Han is like, "Well, we're done. We need to get out of here."
And Leia says, "Take the shot.
Sacrifice us. He's too important of a target."
It's exactly what she says. She says, "All of our deaths are worth it if we take out Vader. Chewie, take the shot." And Han's like, "Chewie, don't risk it, man. Don't do that." So, very good. Chewie takes several shots at Vader. We have these panels that show Vader looking away, And of course, in classic Vader fashion, right before the bolts hit the back of Vader's head and neck area, he immediately turns around, deflects them with his hand and his lightsaber.
And then he does the pretty baller move of force lifting some stormtroopers as shields.
So good. So good. And then Chewie takes a couple more shots. And at this point, Vader collapses the cliff face / industrial platform Chewbacca's on, and Chewie has to jump off or he'll perish. Vader deals with Chewie pretty quick. So at this point, we just see Chewie jumping off.
That's the first member of the Skywalker family that Chewie's going to snipe at.
After this, we have some cool lines from Vader. Vader senses something in the Force, and he says, "He is here. The rebel pilot who destroyed the Death Star. I can feel his presence. He will not escape me again." At the next point, we see we see 3PO on the Falcon, and apparently they left 3PO to manage the Falcon, and there's scavengers on this planet starting to harass the Falcon. 3PO does not know what to do. Then we see Han and Leia saying, "Wait, where's Luke?" Because Luke kind of left to deal with these slaves, and now Vader's here. So now we have a actually really important moment, Mike, with Luke. We hear Luke hear the voice of Ben, and Ben says, "Luke." And Luke says, we got the red text here, Mike. I'm ready. So he said, Ben, is that you? Ben, he's here, Darth Vader. The man who killed my father, who killed you. I have to face him. I have to end this.
But before you get to the awesome part, you know, comics dialogue it has to be different than movie dialogue to give more context for the lack of motion in the pictures. But that feels a little unnecessary because I know you're providing, like, in case you haven't seen Star Wars somehow in the past 40 years, this is what Vader did. It just feels a little wonky.
That's true. But it is kind of cool that we're seeing Ben talking with Luke. And then on top of that, we're seeing Luke is, you're right. He's doing the inner dialogue thing, which we get in a novel.
Except
out loud.
It's not inner dialogue because it's written as a speech bubble. So he's saying it like a dummy.
Oh, I know. But welcome to comic books, Mike. You've arrived. You've arrived. But no, he's saying this is kind of cool because I think he's saying like he has some anger towards Vader. You killed my master. I have to go deal with you. I'm mad. I'm a kind of Jedi now.
Anyway, Luke is all super confident. I'm going to go deal with this. I'm going to get my revenge. Ben, tell me how to do it. And then what? And then Ben says,
he says, "Luke, listen to me carefully. Run."
And that's the cliffhanger that the issue ends on. Luke, lightsaber drawn, staring down Vader, lightsaber drawn in a hallway.
And Ben saying run. And we've never heard Ben say run before. We've had him say, like, face Vader. You will face him alone.
Absolutely wrong. It was the very first thing he said as a Force ghost was run, Luke, run. But that's where the first issue ends.
Yep. So it's a perfect way to end. We're on the second issue now. So Vader confronts Luke. He says, "You hold that weapon like an untrained child. You have no right to it. You, boy, are no Jedi. Who are you?" And Luke says, "You killed my father." He says, "I've killed many fathers. You'll have to be more specific."
It's a good line.
It's a very good line. It's a classic Vader line. A lot of Vader is dry, straight, a little bit of dad mode. A lot of things like Vader's just very much like this. So Luke immediately starts swinging at Vader. And they're not Jedi swings. The comic actually kind of makes it clear. They look like kind of baseball bats, sort of.
He's just sort of swinging it around in front of him, knowing that the pointy end goes into the other man.
Right. We see Vader easily parry it. And Vader says, "This is most pathetic. You are not worth the seconds it would take for me to finish you. Who sent you here like this?" is what he says. Who sent you here?
Vader's just done. He pulls the lightsaber with the Force out of Luke's hand. He's like, "Nah, give me that. That's mine."
100%. Luke says, "I was there on the Death Star. I saw what you did to him. You killed Master Kenobi. And now I have to make sure you..." And he's trails off. "I have to make sure you..." And that's when Vader takes away the saber, like Mike just said. And Vader says, "So, Obi-Wan gave you this lightsaber. It's a shame he did not teach you how to wield it. He never did make much for a master." So once again, we have some callbacks to the prequels here. Also callback to New Hope with Luke's interactions with Obi-Wan in his hut about Vader and Anakin. We got a Vader quote here, which I think is pretty good, especially if you guys at home just listening to this. "The Force will never be with you, boy. Your master has fallen. What hope have you? If you wish to live, you would tell me all you know of the rebellion, including the nature of this attack. And then you will lead me to the rebel pilot who destroyed the Death Star, and I will strike him down. Speak quickly or join your father. And Luke says, I'd rather die than yield to you. And Vader says, so be it. And at this point, Vader's looking at Luke's lightsaber, the blue legacy saber, and he's realizing something. And he says, wait, this lightsaber, I know this weapon. This belonged to... And it's almost like Vader's saying the same line he says in New Hope. I sense something. A presence I haven't sensed since... ... And he walks away. Yeah, then he walks away when Obi-Wan's on the Death Star. At this moment, we have a classic Star Wars Flash Gordon type moment. Han and Leia have commandeered an AT-AT and crushed the foot immediately down between Luke and Vader.
Well, basically they're aiming for Vader.
They're aiming for Vader, and they pretty much get right on top of him. But Vader, of course, with his power, lifts the rebel and holds the foot with the Force. And Luke is still mad here, Mike, so we have this going on. And Luke says, no one else dies because of him. I don't know what happens. Just help me, Ben. Please help me kill him. This is pretty dark.
Does he say, help me kill him?
Yeah, he does. I wrote it down.
Yeah, I believe you. I just didn't remember that being in there. Yeah, so we're seeing hyper confident, hot headed,
young,
still a little whiny Luke. But this is not going the way he thought it was going to go, and he's getting his butt kicked by Vader.
Right, and like we told you guys at home, if Empire was years after New Hope, this is mere months, weeks. So this is still the Luke at the end of New Hope, and he's still got a lot to learn. So the AT-AT starts having cannon problems. Han and Leia can't use the cannons. Vader starts defeating Han and Leia through this because he starts messing with the AT-AT. Luke's rescued slaves now are being shot by stormtroopers. This is a very Star Wars moment where a lot's going wrong for our heroes. Luke says out loud, this is my fault, Ben. I'm not my father. I'm not a Jedi. I'm just a stupid farm boy from Tatooine. I don't even belong here. So Luke's doubting himself. He's seeing these slaves die he just saved. He's seeing his friends, his best friends, Han and Leia, his family now, potentially die to the Sith Lord. He tried to fight the Sith Lord. It was a waste, and the guy just mocked him.
Cocky, arrogant Luke got put back in his place real quick.
But then Luke sees an opportunity, and this is a very classic Luke thing. His affinity for heroicness happens here. He's like, I am a farm boy, all right, but also a farm boy who could bullseye womp rats because he sees a speeder close by.
That's corny.
It's so corny. But
which is part of Star Wars. I will give it.
It's part of Star Wars, and it's also part of Luke at this time, which is New Hope Luke, I would say. He gets on the speeder bike and starts shooting stormtroopers, especially the stormtroopers that are killing the slaves. Then we have Han and Leia restoring power to the cannons. They start firing the cannons of the AT-AT on Vader. So we have Vader fighting an AT-AT walker.
One man with a lightsaber facing down a giant walker. That sounds cool. I wonder what would happen if there were more of them.
They were
anyway
quadruple in size. So then at this point we go back to 3PO. He's still on the Falcon, and he's saying, "Master Solo, they're coming in." He's talking about the scavengers that are taking apart the Falcon, and they're starting to come into the Falcon. And Han says, "There's a blaster in the cockpit. You need to use it." 3PO just looks at it. At this point, 3PO comes down the ramp of the Falcon, very much like the 3PO we see in the films, and he basically tries the polite route and says, like, please don't mess with the ship to these guys, and they just kill him. So,
yeah, we see 3PO get shot, and he blows up just like he did in Empire.
Yeah, so keeps happening.
Then we cut back to, Han trying to smash and shoot Vader with an AT-AT. Vader's moving all around. He just, he doesn't need a tow cable. He just sort of cuts the feet off of the thing.
Yes.
But right before Vader manages to cripple it, Han does get a blast off of the main cannons, which,
puts Vader in some rubble.
Yeah, it definitely throws Vader back.
It's pretty good. Vader's knocked down at this point, and then Vader, you see him lift the rebel. So I'm going to mention this, Mike, as a point that we've seen before in Star Wars Rebels, where Kanan and Ezra fight Vader for the first time, and they bring all this rebel down on him, and Vader basically holds it there, throws it all away, and they're like, how's that possible? And Kanan's like, I'm not sure. Like, Kanan's like, that's way past my powers, capabilities.
It's a good point. I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, and so we see Vader come out of the rebel. His helmet's actually been removed because he was hit. And a stormtrooper comes over to Vader. He's like, Lord Vader, you all right? And he says, by the moons, is what he says, because he sees Vader's scarred, destroyed face. At this point, this is another great Vader moment. I'm just going to keep referencing this because I think these comics nail Vader more than anybody else. Yeah, this trooper sees Vader's face, and the first thing Vader does is he just twists the man's neck backwards.
With the Force.
Exorcist
He
style.
doesn't do it, like an assassin, but he just, with the Force, turns his head back around.
Like, you saw my face with the mask off, I'm going to crack your head completely 180 Exorcist style. He's done. He's gone. So at this point, more slaves are killed by the troopers, but then we see Luke flying around on the speeder bike, saving people, shooting stormtroopers. We also see Luke. There's an ATST that comes in to deal with the rebels, and Luke cuts off the main cannons of the ATST as he's driving by on a speeder bike. It's not a Jedi move. It's just a pilot, and he's just taking the lightsaber out on the side. He's just kind of cutting stuff as he goes. Vader tells the troopers, leave the boy to me. His helmet's back on now. Vader chases Luke's speeder, and there's one of these heavy speeder bikes. He actually throws a stormtrooper off with the Force to drive this heavy speeder bike. Luke escapes, barely. There's an explosion in the factory, the explosion of the charges that Han and Luke and Leia all placed. And Vader, of course, makes it just out fine. You just see Vader walking out of the fire like nothing happened to him, but everybody else died in the factory. And then you see the Falcon escape, and then Han and Leia are in space. There's multiple Star Destroyers, and Leia's like, you better have the correct hyperdrive working on this, and they just go right past it.
So Han and Leia are banged up at this point, because I will say that Vader went back and finished off their AT-AT, crashed it. So they were lucky to crawl away from that crash before they got rescued by Chewie, who scooped up 3PO when he got to the Falcon.
Got a great quote here again from Vader. So Vader sees the Falcon flying off, and he says, the boy is your last great hope, isn't he, Obi-Wan? He is what you died to protect? He may be strong on the Force, but he is untrained. And who is there left to train him now? No one but me. When I find him, and I will find him, he will be my weapon, not yours. The dark side always wins, Obi-Wan. You should know that by now.
Yeah, he got caught monologuing. So this is the end of issue 3. So we're halfway through. Let's jump back to our questions real quick. There's a lot of character development here because Luke continues to commune with Ben, and he is knocked off his high horse in about the most violent way possible.
Right. He actually tries to avenge his master and his father's death against this horrible Sith Lord he knows by the name of Darth Vader. At this point, Luke's never really seen Vader other than the one time he strikes Ben down. That's it. Luke is definitely knocked down physically and emotionally. This is good for Luke in a lot of ways. He's learning about failure, which we've talked about before. He's also learning about that he doesn't really know anything about the Force or how to wield a lightsaber, and Vader is highly trained in that. He also didn't take Ben's advice. Luke run, and Luke stood his ground. So once again, he ignored Ben again.
Or for the first time chronologically.
Right. And then we see him in Empire do it blatantly against him and Master Yoda when they tell him not to go to Cloud City. So
jumping off of that, this is Luke's first failure because in A New Hope, his aunt and uncle die, but that's not really his fault. This is the first time where people die as a result of his actions, his failure.
So right, he saves these slaves. He's very, good-hearted and heroic about this. But then most of the slaves end up dying. Mm-hmm. Almost all of them to the stormtroopers and Vader. Pretty ruthlessly too. Some of them.
So I'm gonna plug our third question in here because I think it fits. Does this fit with the Luke we meet in The Last Jedi? The Luke we met in The Last Jedi failed a lot, but Yoda specifically mentions you didn't pass on your failure. This is the first of those major failures through Luke's journey, right?
Yeah, because he experiences hardship in New Hope in various ways. Like we talked about, losing his family, and he's an orphan already, so losing his aunt and uncle, and then losing his mentor through Obi-Wan and his master, and then losing several of his friends in the trench on the Death Star.
They weren't his friends. He just met them. Biggs was his only friend.
Biggs was like his best friend.
Yeah.
But you get what I'm saying? But you're right. He didn't fail himself so much. Just he lost a lot of people around him, most of the people around him. But it bound him closer to Han and Leia, which was an interesting trade-off.
Oh, I'm not. Yeah, I agree with that. But this is the first time that Luke, you did the wrong thing. You failed here, and it ties into the Last Jedi because Yoda specifically mentions Luke's failures that he did not pass on, and going with
and he almost lost Han and Leia in this too, which I thought was really interesting. He saw Vader chopping up the walker and killing them, and Luke was really saying like, "I failed. I'm not the Jedi I'm not the Jedi like my father was." To Ben, he's like talking out loud to Ben.
Yeah. So what does Luke do after he fails? He runs away.
That's true, but not quite yet. But yeah, you're right.
I was trying to transition us back into the story for the second half.
I love it. So we start with Luke training. So we go back to the Rebel fleet, and Luke is training with a remote, and Leia is talking with
two
authorities. Yeah, two remotes. So we know now he has accelerated his exercises. He's been committing to these like Ben started him with, so that's cool.
We see him training with two remotes. We also see him getting shot in the butt by two remotes a lot.
Right, but he does cut them in half towards the end, which is interesting. So some of this could be anger and aggression.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. He gives in to his anger after getting shot in the butt so many times, and that's when he's able to be strong enough to slice both these things in half.
Don't shoot my butt. Yeah, that's man. So Leia comes in, visits with him. He said, "I should be dead, Leia. We all should be dead. Vader was right. I'm no Jedi. And with Ben dead." So that's where we leave off. At this point, we have a change of the story. We go to what I'm assuming is Tatooine. And we see some criminals on Tatooine dumping a body out in the Jundland Wastes. Really interesting story point. It's almost very Chuck Wendig-ish in a way, Mike, where it's just some world building, but it does lead to the next plot point.
Oh, you mean like the interludes between chapters? Yeah, no, that's good. I like that.
100%. So we see these guys, and they're saying, "We're gonna drop this body out here. We killed this guy, and no one's gonna find him." And they're like, "There's a house here, though." And they're talking about Ben's house. They're like, "Oh, that's just a crazy old wizard. He doesn't interact with anyone. No one comes out here. It's the Jundland Wastes." And they throw this body out. And then we go into a shot zooming into Ben's house. It zooms in closer, and we see a book. And on the book, it's a journal, and it's an Arabesh, which is the Star Wars language. And there's a translated blurb for the reader, and it says, "The journals of Ben Kenobi for Luke." This is for Luke, is what it says. We end there, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, so that's actually the end of issue 3. I had this sort of off a little bit, in case that matters to anyone.
Right. So we had which is interesting about this, Mike, and from a story writing perspective, we had the whole monologue of Vader talking about Ben. Then we had Leia and Luke talking about Luke's failure and Ben being dead. And then we cut to these criminals dropping a body off in the wasteland of Tatooine, and then we see Ben's house, which is now empty, but there's a journal that says for Luke. So a lot of Ben stuff drawing into the reader. And then, of course, it ends. So the next issue starts with something I find very cool. It might be, I don't know, it might irritate you, Mike. I'm not sure. So
most things do.
This is a Vader thing, so it might not irritate you. But we just see Vader at Jabba's palace. So we see Vader go to Tatooine by himself. No royal guards, no troopers. He just walks through. And I think this is pretty interesting because it's indicative of Luke's journey to Tatooine and Jabba's palace later in Return of the Jedi. We see Vader do similar things. Even some of the shots are the same. They show in the comic of Vader walking through Jabba's palace. So it's echoing what Luke's going to become later when he becomes a Jedi Knight. Walking through, like, I'm here to see Jabba. And Vader does the same thing. Vader and Jabba start having negotiations. Vader's not happy with Jabba for the Emperor. He's saying, "You messed up." Because what ended up happening early in the story we know now is the rebels intercepted Jabba's convoy to the Empire.
That's right. The whole reason we met Han at the beginning was he was impersonating Jabba's guy, Jabba's delivery guy.
And so Vader and Jabba have a really interesting interlude. Vader does a lot of veiled threats and straightforward threats, and Jabba just kind of laughs most of it off, which is so Jabba, and
They do a
love
good
it.
job with Jabba. I agree.
And they eventually conclude and say they're going to do some more negotiations, and he invites Vader to stay. I'm going to give a Jabba line here. He says, "I don't know about you, my dear Lord of the Sith, but Jabba the Hutt prefers to seal all his business ventures by watching something die."
Would you put that in brown text in the notes?
Brown text and capital letters. That's Hattis. That's Hattis.
There we go.
So then we go back to the Rebel fleet, and we see Han and Chewie working on the Falcon because it got damaged by the scavengers. We see the droids getting repaired. 3PO's back together. He slaps R2 like, "Why didn't you save me?" And R2 just does a little sound. Then we see a Rebel leader meeting, which I think is very interesting, Mike, for us at home who know several of the Rebel leaders, as in Mon Mothma, Amar Akbar, and Leia. And we see them actually meeting at this time and discussing what the Empire is doing and things like that. Luke's not there. It's not relevant to us as much. Then we cut to Luke training with the remotes. And then we see Leia come in again. And he says, "I'm not interested, Leia." And she says, "In what?" And he says, "In whatever mission you've come to try and talk me into. I told you. It was lucky we were not killed on the last one." And Leia says, "You're just too hard on yourself, Luke. I've seen you do amazing things. Only things a Jedi could." And he says, "I'm no Jedi." And he looks at her with a very serious look, angry.
You're acting like an angry toddler, Luke.
And he says, "I'm a danger to everyone around me." And she says, "Luke, you're special. General Kenobi even saw that." And he says, "Ben's dead just like my father. And when I tried to avenge them," he's referencing them as in Ben and his father. He says, "Vader swatted me away like I was an insect. Just let me go." And Leia says, "Go? This is what you're born for. Where would you go to? Where are you going?" So Leia's kind of pushing back on Luke's, what Mike said earlier, his thoughts of running away, his fear, his anger. She's doing a pretty good job pushing back. We see a bounty hunter on Tatooine asking a group of Rhodians, and Rhodians are the race that Greedo is, "Where's Han Solo?" So then we go back to Vader and Jabba, and I find a funny line here is we see Celestial B. Crumb laughing as Jabba's guards. Yeah, there we go. As Jabba's guards are the weak way snipers are just killing banthas out in the Dune Sea. Jabba's laughing. He's like, "Look, Vader, look at my men. They just kill things for me." And Salacious is laughing, and Vader says, "If you value that creature's life, it will never do that again in my presence."
which is a very good Vader line.
Right. And then Jabba starts talking about the needs of the Empire and the needs of Vader. And Vader says, "I have no needs. I live to serve the Emperor, as do we all." And then Jabba says,
Vader says that. Yeah. No,
yeah. Vader says that. And then Jabba says, "But what about all these bounty hunters I've employed for the Empire to help you in your needs?" And Vader says, "Never speak of this again. We were never supposed to speak of these things." So we've kind of learned another tidbit about Vader with the bounty hunters and Empire. That's directly tied back to Jabba. So apparently Vader goes to Jabba when the Emperor requests it to hire criminals, outlaws, and bounty hunters to outsource certain jobs for the Empire. And this is kind of the way the story is telling us about this prior to Empire. So, and now we know it's actually Jabba's directly related to it. We didn't really know that before. Vader and Jabba start talking about a boy who destroyed the Death Star because Jabba's like, "Oh, what about this boy that destroyed your super weapon?" Jabba's almost mocking him.
He's definitely mocking him.
It's so Jabba. I love it so much. And Vader, and he says, "Wasn't the boy trained by Kenobi?" And Jabba's laughing about that too. And Vader says, "Tell me all the stories you know of Kenobi's time here on this planet." And Jabba says, "Many stories I will tell you of the times that old wizard was a thorn in my side. But who knew anyone of note was ever born of Tatooine?" And it zooms in on Vader's face. Classic Vader, no words, but you just see his helmet. And the emotion is there.
This is something that I'm going to talk about when we're done with the story, but that is so on the nose.
It's a little on the nose. So at this point, we now know that Vader is employing Jabba to find Luke. So then we start seeing Boba Fett working for Jabba,
Busting heads at the Mos Eisley Cantina.
and he ends up busting up one of Luke's old friends in the cantina. And Luke says, Skywalker, his name is Luke Skywalker. Luke always talked about getting off this rock like the rest of us.
And I forget what this guy's name should be. It was one of his
I do
friends
too.
From that Tashi Station deleted scene that called him Wormy and everything.
Yeah, he's like, we used to call him Wormy, but his real name's Luke. And Boba's like, whatever. And the guy's like, will you let me go? And Boba just turns and shoots the guy in the face. Like, it's really brutal. You're like, man. I guess they're showing Boba Fett's no disintegrations element. At this point, we see Luke saying, I need to return to Tatooine. He leaves the rebellion. He says, I don't know what to do, Leia, but I have to do something. I have to figure out what I need to do in this story. He goes back to Tatooine. He goes to Ben's hut. And he's talking to R2 out loud. He says, everything I know about the Force, about being a Jedi, which isn't much, R2, I learned from Ben. And even though he's gone, I can't help but feel like he still has something left to teach me. I hear him sometimes. I know this sounds crazy, but somehow it's really Ben's voice in my head. I don't know why he doesn't just tell me what to do next and where to go, and then ... We see the sand people ransacking Ben's house. And Luke draws his lightsaber and walks up, and they run away. And I think this is actually deeper and cooler than it seems in just the comic. But I think it's indicative of Ben, doing the Tusken sounds, turning on his lightsaber, and they were terrified of him, the Tusken Raiders. But he's been gone for a while.
I don't know that it's Ben they were terrified of, because what probably got passed down through Tusken myth about who slaughtered this guy's distant family like animals. They're probably scared because of Vader or Anakin at the time.
And then Luke's coming back. They see that lightsaber. They run away. And Luke just says, I'm just glad they ran. Because he's basically saying, I'm glad R2 didn't have to use this lightsaber. Which is very...
I would have slaughtered them like animals.
Yeah, Luke would not do that. So, then we go back to Han and Leia. They're looking for a new rebel base. Han's just trying to talk about them and the rebellion. And Leia's like, stop that. We're looking for a new rebel base. And, a little bit of the Han and Leia we see in Empire, but not quite yet. And they go hide on this planet because they get pursued by TIE fighters. But we'll come back to that. We go back to Luke at Ben's hut, and Luke's still talking out loud to R2, or just the reader because it's a comic.
Yeah.
He says, all I fear... Yeah. Luke says, all I fear is anger and frustration. Something tells me that's not the path to becoming a Jedi. I need answers, R2. Let's hope Ben left us some. Suddenly, I'm not so hopeful. Look at this mess. So they go to Ben's house, and it's been ransacked by criminals and sand people, and I'm assuming Jawas as well. And Luke says a cool line here, I think. He says, why Tatooine, Ben? Why here? And then he finds the journal at this point. And he says, does this say for Luke on it to R2? And right as he's saying this, a flashbang grenade of sorts goes off in the hut, and Boba Fett comes to the door, and Luke cannot see. He literally says, I can't see anything. R2, what's going on? And then we have a conflict now between Luke and Boba Fett,
and it takes pretty much the entirety of the next issue.
It really does. So Luke basically says, like, I'm a Jedi, don't mess with me, and Boba Fett says, you're no Jedi. And now we know, with the knowledge of the prequels and Boba Fett's hatred for the Jedi and Jango Fett's interactions with the Jedi, we know that Boba Fett probably knows what a Jedi is, and he's kind of mocking Luke in a pretty serious way here.
Oh, he's absolutely mocking Luke. He says, I just have to I have to bring you in alive, which just means breathing. Don't make me beat the piss out of you, kid.
And Luke says, I'm not a Jedi, but I knew one once, and this was his home. You should have never come here.
Which is
Luke's basically
stupid line. Yeah, well, my friend does a thing, and
that's when we cut back to Han and Leia.
It's fitting with his character.
It is. They're hiding out on this planet, on the shuttle, because they started being pursued by TIE fighters. And apparently Han's kind of engineered this a little bit. This is a planet that Han and Chewie used to have a hideout at.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah, Han takes Leia to this little hideout behind a waterfall where him and Chewie, I'm assuming, smuggle stuff and hide from people. And he says, he's digging through some stuff and he goes, "Oh, thank you, Chewie, for not drinking this last bottle." And I wrote this as a really interesting line because we see Chewie drinking some cocktails in Solo and really enjoying it, and then having the kind of mustache.
I don't remember that part. Need to see it again. September 14th, the Blu-ray release. Sponsor us, Solo. No.
Dude, Chewie's double fisting, and like, Han's like blend in, and then Han runs into Kira, right? And Chewie's just kind of walking around. He has two cocktails. He's just drinking them, and he has a little bit of
that part. Gotta watch it.
A little bit of a cocktail on his mustache. He's a Wookiee mustache. But Han says, "Chewie, oh, thank God Chewie didn't drink this." So Han finds this bottle of Corellian wine. He offers it to Leia. He's like, "Hey, we're hiding out from TIE fighters. Might as well drink this nice wine, right?" And Leia throws the wine in his face. She's all about the Rebel Alliance right now. She thinks it's completely inappropriate. And Han's like, "Hey, it's nice wine."
Your worship. Does he say that? Your worshipfulness? No, he doesn't say it here.
I don't think he does. So at this point, we go back to Luke and Boba Fett fighting. You're right, Mike. You said Boba Fett says, "I just need you breathing." And at this point, he shoots Luke in the arm. And because they've been punching back and forth at this point, Luke can't see him still.
Jetpacking indoors.
Which, Mike, how convenient is this? I'm sure we're going to talk about this later. I'm sure you got plenty to say, but how convenient is it that Luke's blind during all this? Because he's like, that's some serious armor for a stormtrooper, and Boba Fett's like, "You think I'm a trooper? That's cute." So like, because Luke's just punching a guy in armor, assumes it's a stormtrooper, which is reasonable from Luke's character, right? Luke says a Jedi can feel the Force flowing through him. He draws his lightsaber. He's practicing Ben's language.
He says
his
that
words.
like he's trying to convince himself.
Yeah, and Boba Fett says, "Feel this." And Boba aims his blaster right at Luke's face, and he aims the classic Boba Fett EE3 carbine from the movies at Luke. And then
I didn't know that. Good on you with your Lobot brain.
Yeah, and at this point, Luke actually somehow deflects the shot, and he doesn't even know how he did it. And it creates an explosion in Ben's room because I'm assuming it hits a wall and things like that.
So this is his first canon blaster bolt deflection, because we talked about in Shadows of the Empire when he was encountering Shizor's Black Sun guards was the first time he'd done that.
Right, so Luke's basically just saying the Jedi can feel the Force flowing through him. Or Jedi can feel the Force flowing. He's practicing what Ben taught him with the remotes, and Boba Fett fires one shot, and he actually somehow deflects it. But it's very clumsy. At this point, Boba Fett gets Luke on the ground and is going to punch him and knock him out. And out of nowhere, Ben's journal flies and hits Boba Fett in the back of the head. And it's this giant metal journal.
It's not the journal, it's the crate that the journal was in.
The crate the journal was in. That's exactly right.
Because the journal's not going to knock out a guy in a helmet, but the crate it was in.
And it knocks Boba Fett out. And Luke's like, "How did I... R2, what happened?" Like, he's dumbfounded that he was just basically reaching out, and he defended himself without even realizing, just purely through instinct, right? Not through conscious thought. And Boba Fett's knocked out, and Luke escapes, leaves Boba Fett in Ben's house. Boba Fett's knocked out, and Luke gets away with R2 with the journal in his possession.
The sacred Jedi tech.
But Mike, now I got to talk about my favorite part of this entire thing. Once again, this is a Vader moment.
The comics really do Vader very well.
Yeah, the regular comics and of course the Vader comics. So we see Boba Fett return to Vader, and he says, "I lost him." And Vader says, "That is most disappointing." And Boba Fett says, "He got lucky." And he said, "Did you bring me anything of value, bounty hunter?" And he says, "Not much, just a name, Skywalker." There's a long pause here where we see Vader not even turn around or say anything. And Boba Fett says, "I guess we're just done here." He just walks away.
"Hey, bye."
Again, Boba Fett says, "I guess we're just done here." Vader stares out and says, "Skywalker." So now, Mike, I'm going to pull up another reference here because we have to do this. Because this is, I think, one of the best things coming out of these comics recently, especially in the Star Wars comic. So I've pulled up an excerpt from the Vader comic here. We see the same scene in one of the first Vader comics. Same lines, "I lost him. That is most disappointing. He got lucky. All I have is a name, Skywalker." But the Vader comic goes in greater detail. Mike and I have it in front of us. And we see Vader looking out. We see a shot of Anakin and Padme from Revenge of the Sith. Padme says something wonderful has happened. I'm pregnant.
So,
You see
so
Vader's
what we're
face
seeing
again,
in the Vader comic is Vader's like perspective,
Inner
his
thoughts.
on it. Yeah.
which is great. Then we see Vader's face. Once again, the sadness, but we can't actually see his face. We see Anakin's face, and he says, that's wonderful. And we see Vader clenching his fists. And then we see Vader saying, where's Padme? Is she safe? Is she all right? He's saying that to Palpatine. We see Vader's face again in present time. The glass starts shattering on the Star Destroyer he's on.
Which is bad.
And Vader says, I'm afraid she died. It seems your anger, you killed her. And then we see Vader clenching his fists, more glass is shattering, and he says, Skywalker. And then we see a really cool panel here, which is we see Padme's face on Mustafar before Vader chokes her. Actually, Anakin before he becomes full Vader. Then we see Padme and her funeral site and her coffin. Then we see Luke's X-Wing. We see the view of Vader's TIE Fighter looking at the back of Luke's X-Wing when he says the Force is strong with this one. And then we see Luke with the yellow jacket fighting Vader in the hallway in this very comic we just read. And Vader says, I have a son. He will be mine. It will all be mine. So that's the end of this whole series, the 6-arc thing.
Not the whole series, the end of this story. The series is still going on.
But this is where we're left off. We leave off on a very crucial moment, which is Vader finding out that the rebel pilot is actually a Skywalker, and not only Skywalker, but his actual son that he never knew about. Now we can talk about criticisms. We can talk about what we liked, what we didn't like.
Thank God. I've been waiting this whole time.
Hey, you're doing pretty good.
Criticism number 1. Like I said at the beginning, I really like John Cassidy, but some of the character art, he's best when he's doing original or not real people characters. Some of like the Leia, Luke, and Han faces.
They look kind of strange.
It's all over the spectrum. Some are just not good, but others are really good. And
some are amazing, yeah.
I mean, I can't do that, so I'm not going to like say he's a hack because he's not. He's a great comic artist, but it is jarring at times to go from a really good one, then turn the page and that's not Leia.
Yeah, that scene with Luke and Leia and the with the remotes where Luke was training. Luke looks spitting image Luke.
And Leia does not.
No, not at all. So some of these Leia looks like Padme.
Yeah.
And she's actually even wearing, I didn't mention this when I think I should. Somebody who's a fan of Padme and stuff, but I think Leia's actually wearing kind of the Padme getup in some of this. It's like the assault.
Episode 2 version.
That's a cool callback, but you're right. It doesn't look right in some of the stuff.
And to stick with the comic medium criticism, he did a great job writing Vader and Jabba, and usually Luke. I really didn't.
Yeah,
I
Luke
really wasn't
for sure.
feeling the Han and Leia dialogue. It felt too abrasive, maybe too much, just too forced, and some things are too on the nose. But it's still a very well-made comic. I'm not trying to say that. These are very relatively minor criticisms. My biggest one is I think this story is bad. It's a very well-made comic arc, but I do not like the story because we see Luke encounter Vader and Boba Fett before Empire Strikes Back. And
right.
I'm saying this as someone who generally likes the Disney canon a lot. I don't like so many of the choices that were made here because there's, like you were saying earlier, too many callbacks to future movies, call forwards, I guess, to Empire with Luke and Vader in the hallway, the stuff on Tatooine with Vader in Jabba's palace. They're even the same shots, which wouldn't Vader being Anakin know a lot about Jabba because Jabba was the one who started that pod race and everything.
Yeah, but what does that have to do with it? What does that do with anything?
I just don't get why Vader would go there.
I mean, he's been told to go there by the Emperor.
So you delegate. You send somebody. Anyway, that's minor in the.
Dude, Jabba even calls this feature out. He's like, what does Vader want? Basically, is what Jabba says, like a therapist.
And like I said,
and Vader's like, I only do what the Emperor wills. Like I'm his mouthpiece. That's it. And Jabba's like, huh, interesting. Wow.
And like I said, I think the Vader and Jabba stuff was well done. But I don't like that Luke encounters Vader before Empire Strikes Back, even though it is fitting with his character in The Last Jedi. I really don't like the Boba Fett encounter because they had to blind him.
That bothers me the most, actually.
Just for it to make narrative sense. It feels really just forced into the overall timeline. It leads to a very cool moment, Vader finding out that, a Skywalker.
Oh, great moment.
Yeah. That's the big payoff for the whole arc.
And the flashbacks of his Anakin pain and it's flashing back too to Palpatine kind of manipulating him a little bit too. Like, well, so sorry you killed your wife. Just how it is. You're with me now.
So, it leads to a really good payoff and starts to develop Vader as a character. But in terms of Luke, like, I just hate that entire 6th issue that is the fight with Boba Fett. So those two encounters are probably my biggest gripes with it. Like, I even admit that the one with Vader is very well done. With Vader,
the dialogue is awesome.
The dialogue, and he's just so much stronger in the Force. But I feel like that almost cheapens their meeting in Empire Strikes Back.
I would agree, and this is why I think, Mike, this is good for a lot of listeners at home that aren't going to read this stuff. They know it exists. In a weird way, this is canon, but you don't need to know it, right? So they're doing a weird.
That's right. It's not required reading.
They're doing a weird thing where they're bridging the gaps very clearly, but they're also like, if you don't know this, the films are consistent with this, but they're not inconsistent with this. Boba Fett's really frustrating to me, even though I think the way he finds Luke is very, very Boba Fett, which is cool. I didn't mention this, but before he gets to the cantina, we see multiple shots of him interrogating people, killing people, following leads. It's just several panels of no dialogue, just him pointing guns at people and traveling, following leads, very noir-esque. And
they're trying really hard
all that's
to develop
good.
Him as a character.
Yeah, you're right. But I think the Vader stuff is fantastic. The Luke stuff, I think, is like 90% or 95% what Luke we see in New Hope and Empire, which is insane.
And I agree, Luke is pretty well written, and it fits mostly with Empire and with our theme through to Last Jedi. It's just I'm really bothered by those two encounters happening.
I'm too.
Before Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, it does kind of cheapen both of those characters, Vader and Boba Fett, for the audience first time they see them.
And hey, look, I really dislike the way a story went, but I'm not attacking the creators. I've got criticisms of it. Maybe not the choices I would have made, but I still enjoyed the experience of it. It's still very well made. It's going back to our calling out toxic fandom. Like, I get that a lot of people don't like the story of The Last Jedi. And that's fine. Let's have a big discussion about it. But let's not go create a Twitter account dedicated to bashing The Last Jedi and fans of it.
Right. It is bizarre. Like I talk about a lot on the show, Star Wars is so vast and wide. Like, you can enjoy so many things or so few things and still be with us. You know what I mean? You don't have to like it all, and you certainly don't have to bash people for liking other things, which is frustrating. So a couple points I wrote here, Mike, on the story. A lot of emotions from Luke. Some of it might be semi-contrived and out loud, but that's just comic book style. But I think the emotions are really good. A lot of anger from Luke, a lot of conflict within Luke, a lot of uncertainty. He even says, I'm not sure I'm a Jedi. I don't even know what I'm trying to do. This doesn't seem like the Jedi way. He's questioning himself. But we do see a little bit of leveling up of his powers, like we talked about in Shadows of the Empire.
There were a lot of
minorly.
There were a lot of things sort of lifted from Shadows of the Empire. 3PO being in charge of the Falcon at one point and stuff like that.
Luke deflecting a bolt. Luke trying a mind trick for the first time. It did not work in this, but he tried it.
It just moved it up a movie instead of being between 5 and 6. It's between 4 and 5.
Right. And we're assuming that a lot of this is going to evolve as this Marvel series goes on. You guys will be on this journey with us. There's a lot of emphasis on Ben. He even tells R2 out loud, like, R2, I know it sounds crazy, but Ben sometimes talks to me and I don't know what it means. I thought that was pretty cool too. He's like, I wish Ben would just give me clear direction rather than just give me quick hints, basically.
Rather than coming in when it's the last possible second to
Yeah.
give you some advice.
But I think it's consistent with Luke from New Hope. We just see a little bit of evolution with Luke's powers and more self-doubt, which I think is only refreshing at this point.
Yeah,
Like
no.
you said, Luke's failed in different ways in the story.
It's very consistent. And I've just thought of one other thing that I meant to mention. Those two encounters bother me. I also don't like 3PO getting blown up and Chewie putting him back together here, because the same exact thing happens in Empire. Literally.
Yeah, it's like, you guys know Star Wars? Here's Star Wars.
Yeah,
it's like...
a little too much.
But my only rebuttal to this, and I mentioned this possibly through text or something while we're rereading this, I love Vader and the Chewie, though brief conflict. Chewie taking pot shots against Vader, like you said, for not only the first time he's going to do this, someone in the Skywalker family.
Oh no, I think that's good. But just when 3PO exploded, I was like, really? We're doing this same thing again, but before the other movie.
And I will mention too, as a big advocate for Chewie, other than the sniper thing, which was awesome and it was actually important, Chewie doesn't get to do much in the story at all so far.
Which
But
is
I'm sure-
consistent with the original trilogy. Ooh.
Oh man.
But no, you're right. You're right.
He did more than this and this, but we'll see. We'll see. I mean, we're only 6 issues in, one graphic novel in, but that's basically it, Mike, in the story. So this to me is completely consistent with Luke and New Hope and Empire, and it perfectly bridges this gap. I don't think there's really any inconsistencies with Luke. What I find an inconsistency is the thing you've already mentioned, is Luke facing Vader prior to Empire. And it kind of cheapens Obi-Wan and Yoda as well when they say you must face Vader alone.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily contradict the films or anything, but it just makes it weaker.
It's odd, you know. It'd be like before Infinity War, somehow Captain America punched Thanos a couple times, one time, you know. I mean, just randomly between two films, you
That
know.
comes out next week. I'm super excited for Infinity War to watch that.
Yeah,
again.
I am too. I really am too. So interesting. And obviously the moment we end on is incredible, which is Vader finding out that his son's name is Skywalker, that he even has a son, and that he puts the pieces together. Oh, that semi-force sensitive pilot is actually my son. And it kind of guides Vader's new mission. And this is kind of Vader's, it's a side prerogative for Vader, even though we know eventually later Palpatine puts him on this mission to turn Skywalker, but now it's kind of like become a different motivation for Vader on the side, which will eventually lead to Vader's redemption and Return of the Jedi. I don't know. It's cool.
We're going to run over to the Djarik table real quick.
Think. You want to make that move. You want to make that move. You made that move, okay.
I guess I'll have to destroy that little guy.
Somehow I never get bored with winning. You can't wipe them off. They're holograms. Hey, Chewie, relax. Hey.
So I didn't really intend to throw this segment in the show today, but I had no idea that this was happening.
Sorry.
So there's a game called Jedi Fallen Order that's supposed to come out holiday season 2019 that Jesse knew all about. So I'm just going to let him talk about it.
Okay. So a couple of the guys that made the Titanfall games on consoles, which were pretty highly acclaimed by a lot of people.
Titanfall 2 was awesome. I loved it.
Well, they're working on this new game called Jedi Fallen Order. And what excites me about this, Mike, is we don't know much about the game. We don't have a trailer. We don't even have much of anything. We just have the announcement of the game. But we know this. Jedi Fallen Order will take place during the period shortly after Revenge of the Sith, following a survivor Padawan during the dark times of the franchise when the Jedi are being hunted down. So this is a game that's going to focus on a Padawan post-execute Order 66 from Palpatine. And what the world looks like for a Jedi. The creator, his name is Vince Zampella. He said that on Twitter, it'll be a single player story game that's dark and gritty. And all we know is that you get to wield a lightsaber in the game and you are this Padawan. So that could mean a lot of things.
Well, so I'm going to ask one of the obvious questions for Star Wars fans. Are you actually playing as Kanan Jarrus / Caleb Doom? Is this going to be his game, or is it just a similar character who is having to go into hiding to survive as a Jedi post Order 66?
That would be a really cool reveal if they did that closer to the launch of the game, but they have not said if you be Kanan. But this is definitely echoing Kanan's story, which is, Jedi Padawan, probably separated from their master. Order 66 happens, they get out, but now they're living in this world that's Vader hunting the Jedi down, and the Empire everywhere, troopers everywhere looking for Jedi. So I have no idea. We know nothing.
Well, we do know that Freddie Prinze Jr. Has experience voice acting for video games because he was in Mass Effect 3 as one of your party members. So it could be Kanan. I kind of don't want it to be because I always like seeing new characters introduced in video games, but I don't think I'd be upset if it was.
Same. And it'd be cool to see young Kanan as well. I didn't even think about that, Mike. Good point. Wow. That could change things a lot. Also, this could introduce Kanan to most of the world who I think doesn't know about him, because the medium of video games, we haven't gotten to this too much on our show, but we have talked about the influence of them, and especially with Shadows of the Empire, but it's a much wider medium than most of the books and comics and shows, really. It's kind of like we have the movies and then we have the video games and then everything else comes after that. We're Star Wars fanatics, so for us it's just all the same. But I think for the general public, a lot of people are like, "Oh yeah, I remember Star Killer. I remember Sam Witwer as the Secret Apprentice." And the Force Unleashed games, which is no longer canon. But it's like a lot of people know that though over Clone Wars, right? Which is
Rebels, yeah.
So interesting, but I'm excited. We're gonna hold our breath. We will obviously update you guys when we know more about it. I'm sure there'll be something in the next year or year and a half or so.
Hopefully, we get some sort of Star Wars video game before holiday season of next year. Whether that's another big Battlefront update or something. Anyway,
that's it on the dark table.
Well, before we wrap up, I threw a poll up on Twitter today.
A couple hours before our show, right?
That's right. So we actually operate on like a 2-week ahead cycle, so you'll be hearing this a little bit after the poll had gone up. But in our second episode, I fired off the flaming hot take that I like The Last Jedi more than The Empire Strikes Back. That is not me saying The Empire Strikes Back is bad or by how much more I like it, but I'm saying that I like The Last Jedi more than The Empire Strikes Back. So I put the question, you heard my hot take, am I crazy? And I said, we're recording tonight, so let us know which of the two films is your favorite, and we'll talk about it on a future show. Well, that's today. As of right now, 85% of respondents are saying The Empire Strikes Back, and 15% are saying The Last Jedi. And my response to that is, woo, I'm not alone. I thought it might be a 100-0 when I put that up. So
really?
I totally did.
I thought it'd be like 85 or 90, which is what we landed on.
I knew it was a hot take, and I'm not like Empire is treated as sacred. It's a great film, masterpiece, love it. But for right now, if I had to choose, I'm going to choose The Last Jedi every time. And I'm glad that 15% of people that responded agree with me.
Every time, man. That was a quick poll. I'm actually excited to see how this poll evolves maybe over the next couple of days, but we're sitting at a little bit over 40 votes on this poll right now, which was pretty amazing, guys, that you guys voted that. In a couple hours, we had 40 votes.
Yeah, we just had that up since this afternoon, and we've really only been live as a podcast for a week in general. So thanks for everybody that's followed us on Twitter or whatever.
Yeah, thanks for talking about that, Mike. Yeah, all of our forms of social media, right?
Including our Twitter follower, Cass Skellington, who right before we started recording replied to the poll with this. I thought it was great and sort of is a better way of expressing what I feel about The Last Jedi, but she put it into better words.
I'd love to hear it, yeah.
Yeah, so Cass said, I voted The Last Jedi. I've been a fan for 30 plus years. Empire Strikes Back has always been my favorite Star Wars. It's the Star Wars movie I always want to watch. However, The Last Jedi is the Star Wars movie that I needed. But it wouldn't be my new favorite if not for the 7 saga films that came before it. The weight of the story that came before adds to my love. And then in a separate tweet, she said, so basically Empire Strikes Back is what has driven my Star Wars obsession for most of my life, but The Last Jedi is what I see carrying my franchise forward and making it my new favorite, which that is a much better way of expressing how I feel about The Last Jedi than I could ever put into 2 tweets, for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm speechless. That's very good. I like the part she's talking about the 7 franchise films to lead up to The Last Jedi. Like, as in, Star Wars is not just, one film, but it's a lot of building, right? So, and there's so much different in all the films. So
exactly. So I'm not saying that I'm discounting everything that came before it. That's not true. I rag on the prequels a lot because they're not very well made movies, but there are things to like in them. And I'm not saying that I don't like Empire Strikes Back. It's a fantastic film. It's probably number 2, just barely on my list. But this, I just wanted to throw a shout out to Cass in there because I really agreed with what she said.
Very good. And I'm sure this poll will maybe evolve a little bit over the next couple of days if it's still up, and we'll see what anyone else says. But it's still exciting nonetheless.
Yeah, so thanks for responding so quickly to that poll. We're going to try to put up at least one poll a week because I think they're fun, and we want to get some more fan interaction here on the show. I'm going to thank all you guys at home right now because our Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, even our Instagram, which is the least of these, and all of our podcast subscriptions have all blown up, and we can only thank you guys for that. And the best thing you can do to support our show is not only listen and participate, but it's to share our show and subscribe to our show. And then if you can, give us a review on one of your respective websites where you procure podcasts. So that could be iTunes, could be somewhere else. We would greatly appreciate any of that. Like I said, we've only been live for a week as of us recording this, but we have a Facebook page. Like us there. Find us on Twitter at The Canon Cantina. Instagram at Canon Cantina. One has the, one doesn't. There's links on our Facebook page and everything. But yeah, reviews and ratings are really important. We are super open to feedback. If there's something that you think we can do better to improve the show, please let us know. Send us an email to canoncantina@gmail.com. Yeah, and I'm all for being transparent and open with you guys, so we'd love to hear your feedback. And another thing, too, is, guys, we're a brand new show, so we've been working out the kinks. We've been working out the electronic kinks, as in the mic setup, the computer stuff. Mike's been slaving away with the editing. And there's just a lot of things we're still working on, and we hope that it's improving every episode, and you guys are noticing that and enjoying that. We're doing our best, and we only want to improve, so please tell us stuff about this, and please share the show with other people you know. We think that this show has potential to reach not only the Star Wars fanatics in your life, like myself and Mike, but also the Star Wars just dads out there, like we talked about earlier. Your dad's understanding of Star Wars is the trilogy and the sequels and the prequels. Maybe he might like this show because it bridges gaps between these things. It tells him about Luke outside the story of the movies. We would love to have people like that. And that's actually my main goal is to get a lot of people that aren't the fanatics I am to just have fun. Hopefully our show's informative and entertaining for them to learn something about Star Wars they don't know. That's right. So the Canon Cantina is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, the Google Play Music Store, Stitcher, Podbean, Podcast Addict. Our shows are posted over to YouTube. We'll be on Spotify soon. If your podcast app of choice does not have our show, just let us know, and I will do what I need to get it on there. So guys, join us next week as we continue more of the stories of Luke Skywalker, and that's going to be Luke Skywalker around the original trilogy, post-original trilogy time through the Disney canon and the EU canon. So we hope you guys are enjoying this. Give us feedback about original trilogy stuff and share that with people you know, because those people know the original trilogy and enjoy that. And maybe they'll get into these other fringe episodes that are about Luke and comics and books and stuff. Maybe. I don't know. But we really appreciate you guys listening.
thank you for everything you guys are doing. And, I have no complaints, Mike. We're only thankful at this point.
Yeah, we hope you had a good time here in the Canon Cantina this week. Cheers, everybody.
May the force be with you.
Boring conversation anyway.